All right, now let's take a look at that grains market now. See, the International Monetary Fund has estimated that Russia's exit from the deal allowing Ukrainian exports via the Black Sea could drive global grain prices up 10 to 15%. Meanwhile, the Food and Agriculture Organization, they've stated that the rising illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing pose a threat to food security in West Africa. Let's talk to Ted George now, founder and chief narrative officer, Cleo's Advisory Limited in the UK. Great to have you on the show.
And good to be back, laddie.
So quite a gloomy forecast there by the IMF. And, looking at Russia's body language now, is there any chance that Russia might get back in the Black Sea grain deal?
Well, it is possible. I mean, negotiations are continuing. There's a lot of mediation efforts. But I think the thing to bear in mind is that we have definitely left the previous deal behind. When that was on, Ukraine was able to export 80 to 90% of what it had been exporting before the year, before Russia invaded, and markets kind of stabilized a bit. But Russia is now directly targeting grain infrastructure, grain silos, port infrastructure. So it's really caused a jitter to the markets. That's why we've seen already wheat prices are up by more than 10% to around 750 barrels a bushel. But we should remember that is well below where they were when markets panicked back in February 22. It went up to nearly 1,200. So there's still a long way to go, but this is the last thing the world wanted because we've got really high inflation and really high food prices.
Ukraine can still get out grain through other sources.
It's true, but remember, I mean, the entire network and the export infrastructure had been set up to export out of these three major ports. If you just say, well, we're going to put all of this grain on rail or on road, what about all of the traffic that normally uses it? You can't just suddenly make space. Most of the infrastructure in Europe is heavily overloaded. And there have been issues as well with bordering neighbors of Ukraine. If you think of Poland, they're saying, we don't want huge surges of wheat coming into our country. What about our own wheat farmers? They want to be able to sell at a decent price. So there's quite a bit of local politics to manage as well as logistics. But I think the thing to bear in mind is that most of this risk has been priced in by the international market. There are many other alternative sources now for grain other than Ukraine and Russia. It is hurting the market, but nothing like it did a couple of years ago.
Now we see the FAO there have said that rising illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing is posing a threat to food security in Africa. That's now for the sea. What do you make of this?
Well, I mean, it is a huge problem, particularly for West Africa, this question of illegal fishing. Something like 20% of all the illegal fishing in the world happens in West Africa. It's been described as an epicenter for illegal fishing. And this has a huge cost. I mean, they estimate as much as $10 billion in lost revenues, either to locals or to local governments as well. And so I think the real problem here is that it impacts the populations in many ways. One is the loss of business. If you think of canoe fishermen, their incomes have fallen by at least 40% in the last 10 years. But also there's this whole thing about the fact that most coastal communities get nearly all of their protein from fish. And this overfishing is severely damaging the local stocks and populations. So it means it won't only have an environmental impact, it's going to have a social and economic impact too on the Africans living in West Africa.
All right, so much to unpack there. Thank you so much. Always great to have you. I'm Ted George, founder, chief narrative officer, Cleo's Advisory UK. Thank you.
My pleasure.